Chapter 1. The Hour the World Forgot. Before the world opens its eyes, before the machines start their hum, before the noise of expectation tightens its grip around your throat, there exists a sacred hour, the hour the world forgot. Not because it lacked importance, but because most never had the courage to face it. It is quiet, still, empty, but only on the surface. Beneath the silence, it roars. This hour, this first hour of the day, is where your war is either won or surrendered, without a single word spoken aloud. It's where Lincoln sat, alone in the dark, haunted by the weight of a torn nation, yet still stood and signed his name beneath the burden of history. Where Edison struck match after match in the pitch-black cave of invention, failing 10,000 times just to bring one light to life. Where Carnegie dreamed, not of steel, but of building men strong enough to hold it. This hour isn't about motivation. It isn't about checking boxes or drinking lemon water. It's about resurrection. A daily rising of the soul, before the world can bury it again in distractions and doubts. Because the truth is, most men wake up to their alarms. The few wake up to their purpose. And if you don't choose your thoughts in this hour, the world will assign them to you. If you don't shape your identity here, it will be molded by the hands of strangers and broken by the opinions of cowards. This is where you stop begging for permission. This is where you remember that you were not born to chase, but to build. To rise with the sun, not just from your bed, but from the ashes of the man you were yesterday. Do you understand? This isn't just about changing your morning. This is about taking back your mind, your will, your story. Because from the moment you open your eyes, you are either creating the life you want, or submitting to the life you fear. And the first thing you do, the first breath, the first thought, the first step you take, they become the architects of your entire day. Think of a sculptor. He doesn't start by smashing rock blindly. He begins with stillness, with vision, with reverence for what hides inside the marble. He carves with intention, and so must you. Before the messages, before the mirrors, before the weight of who they expect you to be, you must return to yourself. Who are you without the noise? Not your job title, not your bank account, not the story they handed you like a script you never asked for. I'm asking about the you who still breathes beneath all that. The you who once dreamed. The you who knew you were born for something more, but was told to quiet down, to fit in, to stop making people uncomfortable. Well, let them be uncomfortable. Because if your dreams don't unsettle people, they're not big enough. If your goals don't sound like rebellion to the average mind, you're not playing in the realm of destiny. This morning, this hour, is your revolution. And revolutions are never clean. They are loud on the inside. They are filled with doubt. Screaming matches between the man you were and the man you are becoming. But it is here, in this quiet war with yourself, that empires are born. Not out there, not in applause or trophies or headlines, but here, in this hour that asks, will you answer? Or will you go back to sleep? Because sleeping with your eyes open is the most dangerous state of all. That's where dreams rot. That's where greatness goes to die. Dressed in normal clothes, smiling politely, always on time for someone else's agenda. But you're not here for that. You're here to remember, to break the cycle of passive existence, to stop being a slave to reaction, and become a master of direction. There is no such thing as just a morning. Each one is a birth, and what you do with it will echo into every corner of your life. Think of Henry Ford. He wasn't just building cars. He was building belief in an idea, in an efficiency that would alter the rhythm of the world. And it started not with blueprints, but with conviction. Think of Disney. Not the castle, not the characters. Think of the man sitting in a broken-down studio, drawing a mouse with nothing but a pencil and a stubborn refusal to quit. Those moments happened in the early hours, before the world clapped, before it cared. That's where legends are shaped. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows before the curtain rises. So ask yourself, in this sacred hour, what am I building? What thought will I tolerate in my mind this morning? What standard will I set with my breath, my posture, my decisions? Will I rise like a king, or will I drift like a ghost through my own story? Because someone out there, right now, is counting on your breakthrough. They haven't met you yet. They don't know your name. But they are waiting for what only you can create. A book, a company, a movement, a word at the right time that keeps someone else alive. You think this is just another morning? This is your forge. This is your mountain. This is your sacred fire. So when your feet touch the ground, you don't just walk. You declare. Declare that you are no longer a victim of delay, a slave to fear, an echo of someone else's choices. You are a creator, a sculptor, a sovereign force of will wrapped in flesh and fire. And your morning? It is your altar. Treat it like one. Chapter 2, The Furnace of the Mind. The moment you awaken is not simply a return from sleep, it is a re-entry into the battleground of your own mind, and whether you realize it or not, that battleground is always active, always smoldering beneath the surface, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you choose to confront it or let it rule you from the shadows. And if you don't seize the reins within the first moments of your day, if you don't take brutal, deliberate, conscious ownership of the direction of your thoughts, then you will walk into the fire without armor, and every voice, every headline, every subtle comparison, every criticism, every ghost from yesterday will hijack your sense of direction before your feet even leave the bedroom floor. Mindset is not a buzzword, it is not a catchy title for productivity hacks, it is not a poster on a corporate wall, it is the engine room of your identity, and if that engine is filled with decay, self-doubt, borrowed beliefs, inherited fears, and outdated scripts, then no amount of surface-level motivation will move you anywhere worth going. You must understand this. Every decision you make today, what you eat, how you walk, what you tolerate, what you pursue, what you avoid, what you say and what you leave unsaid, all of it is downstream from your mindset, and if you do not interrogate and reforge that mindset every single morning, then you are simply operating on borrowed time, walking a loop, not a path. Carnegie did not build an empire of steel because someone handed him a mindset on a silver platter. He built it because he understood the poverty of the mind is far more dangerous than the poverty of circumstance. And before he ever held iron in his hand, he gripped belief in his mind. It is your mindset that will define how you interpret failure, whether it becomes your tombstone or your training ground. It is your mindset that will dictate how you respond to rejection, whether you internalize it as proof of your inadequacy or recognize it as a sharpening stone for your strength. It is your mindset that decides whether your past becomes a prison or a blueprint. You see, the world won't stop trying to shape you. It will throw 1,000 illusions in your path. It will tell you that your value is transactional, that your worth is external, that your significance is granted by likes, metrics, and proximity to power. But those are lies dressed in suits. If you do not cultivate a mindset stronger than the noise around you, then you will drown in distractions while convincing yourself you're staying busy. And busyness is the drug the average man uses to avoid doing the soul work required to change his life. You must go deeper. Mindset is forged, not found. It is forged in the heat of self-confrontation, in the willingness to sit in silence and observe the ugly truths without running away, in the discipline of choosing a higher thought when the lower one feels easier, in the fire of repetition, over and over and over again, until what once felt unnatural becomes your new default. The ancient Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius, seated atop the most powerful empire of his time, still began each morning with the humility of a man who knew his mind was the only kingdom he truly had to govern. He wrote to himself, not for applause, not for others, but to anchor his thoughts to truth, to remind himself that power, wealth, and status meant nothing if he could not rule over his own reactions, if he could not control the storm within. And that storm exists in all of us. We all carry remnants of doubt, of shame, of fear masquerading as logic, and the most dangerous thing you can do is pretend those remnants don't exist. Because when you ignore the weeds, they don't disappear, they just grow in silence until they strangle the roots of your potential. So how do you reforge your mindset every morning? You confront it. You meet yourself before the world meets you. You sit with your thoughts like a craftsman sits with his tools, cleaning, sharpening, discarding what is dull, polishing what is worthy. You ask yourself with ruthless honesty, what belief am I carrying today that no longer serves the man I am becoming? You ask, is the voice in my head my own, or the echo of someone else's limitation? You remind yourself that doubt is not a stop sign. It's a signal to dig deeper. That fear is not a wall. It's a door disguised as fire. That failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path carved through resistance, every step burning the old version of you away. The mind, left unattended, becomes a prison. But the mind, when trained, becomes a weapon, sharp enough to cut through illusion, powerful enough to carve new realities from nothing but thought and action. Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right." He wasn't talking about optimism. He was talking about command. He was pointing to the deepest truth, that your internal world builds your external world, brick by brick, moment by moment, thought by thought. The first hour of your day is the construction site of your identity. It is the moment to either build with intention or recycle yesterday's debris. So do not waste it. Do not check your phone before checking your thoughts. Do not open the world before opening yourself. Do not leave your mental door unlocked and then wonder why intruders walk in dressed as self-doubt. This isn't a game. This is your life. And if your mindset is passive, your results will always be predictable. But if you dare to confront the darkness before it confronts you, if you dare to choose discipline over drama, belief over bitterness, creation over consumption, then you will begin to understand what it means to be truly powerful. Because true power is not about controlling others. It's not about domination or force. True power is quiet. It is the ability to hold your center in chaos. To stand still in a storm without flinching. To act from vision, not reaction. To walk into uncertainty and make decisions rooted in conviction instead of fear. That kind of power is born from a mindset that has been earned, tempered by struggle, tested in solitude, refined in reflection. So tomorrow morning and every morning after, do not search for motivation. Do not wait for some external spark. Do not rely on another video or another book or another voice telling you what you already know deep inside. Instead, become the spark. Become the voice. Become the source of your own fire. Because when the mind is aligned, clear, focused, intentional, there is nothing outside of you that can override what's inside of you. And that is the foundation of transformation. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Belief. Belief is not a feeling. It is not a mood. It is not some soft, abstract optimism passed around on greeting cards or whispered in feel-good seminars. Belief is the architecture of your reality. It is the blueprint that shapes every decision you make, whether you are conscious of it or not. It defines what you reach for, what you tolerate, what you dismiss, and what you fight for. If your beliefs are weak, uncertain, or borrowed from a world that never wanted you to rise, then no amount of effort, strategy, or ambition will carry you to the place your soul was built to go. Because effort without belief is movement without direction, and motion without meaning eventually leads to exhaustion, not achievement. You have to understand that the most powerful infrastructure in your life is invisible. It's not your job, your bank account, or your body. It is the internal framework, your belief system, quietly operating beneath the surface of every action you take. If deep down you believe you are not worthy of success, you will subconsciously sabotage it. If you believe that struggle defines you, you will cling to it even when peace becomes possible. If you believe that greatness is reserved for the chosen few, then you will unconsciously exclude yourself from the very life you were born to build. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you lack potential. It's because the mind cannot execute what the heart does not believe it deserves. This is why so many people grind for years and still feel like nothing moves. Because deep down, they are trying to build skyscrapers on sand. They are trying to construct a life of strength, freedom, and meaning on a foundation that was handed to them by parents who never healed, teachers who never believed, friends who projected their fear, or a society that survives by keeping the majority doubting themselves. You cannot keep running toward a future if your belief system is anchored to your past. And you cannot build a new life using the same materials that built your old one. Every morning, when your eyes open, your beliefs report for duty. They step into the control room before your feet hit the floor. They decide what kind of day you'll have before you even leave the house. They dictate how you respond to problems, how you carry your body, what you think you're capable of, what goals feel too big, what risks feel out of reach. The most dangerous part? Most of your core beliefs were installed without your permission. They arrived when you were too young to challenge them. They were shaped by repetition, trauma, lack, ridicule, silence. So the question is not, do you have beliefs? The question is, do your beliefs belong to you, or to the people who gave up on themselves? You need to reclaim your mind. And to do that, you need to go back into the infrastructure of your belief system like an architect walks into an abandoned building, pulling back walls, testing the foundation, shining light into dark corners. And when you find rot, you don't patch it up with temporary motivation. You tear it out. You strip it to the bone and rebuild it with intention. The greats all understood this. Thomas Edison didn't believe in failure the way others did. He reframed it. He called it learning. He said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. You hear that and you think it's clever. But understand, that's not a cute quote. That's a system of belief. That's a worldview. It allowed him to persist beyond what most would ever endure. That belief, his lens, became a force field against despair. It didn't remove pain. It redefined it. Walt Disney didn't walk into the world with a billion-dollar company. He walked in with a belief so audacious, so absurd to the average person, that it sounded like delusion. He was told repeatedly that his dreams were unrealistic, that his ideas would never succeed, that nobody wanted to see a mouse on screen. But he believed not just in the characters. He believed in his capacity to bring a vision to life that others couldn't yet see. He believed in imagination as currency. He believed in wonder as strategy. That belief didn't just guide his art. It guided his endurance through bankruptcy, ridicule, and betrayal. Every monumental achievement you admire, every innovator, artist, builder, or leader who reshaped the course of history, was powered not first by knowledge or connections or even talent, but by an unshakable core of belief. It's not that they didn't doubt. It's that their belief was louder than their doubt. And belief doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Real belief whispers, and still commands action. This is the missing piece for so many people today. They wait for confidence before taking action. But belief is not born from evidence. Belief creates the evidence. It starts as a decision, not a feeling. It is a muscle you train by acting in alignment with it every day, even before the world reflects it back to you. Even when nothing around you looks like progress. Even when it feels like you're the only one who sees what you're building. Because if you're waiting for proof before you commit, then you are living as a mirror, not a creator. And belief, true belief, is the realm of creators. It is a form of spiritual engineering. You're building something in your mind that the world has not yet caught up to. And that is why belief is lonely. That's why it's hard. That's why it's easier to fit in, to shrink, to stay safe. Because belief costs you the comfort of agreement. But it buys you the possibility of transformation. And that cost? It's worth it. So how do you install new beliefs? Not through words alone. Through identity. You must wake up every morning and begin behaving like the person you would be if you already had the life you desire. Not faking it. Embodying it. You ask, how would the version of me who's already there think, speak, move, choose? And then you close the gap, daily. You live from the future, not the past. You make decisions from the place you're going, not the place you've been. And you remind yourself again and again that belief is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move anyway. It is the refusal to let fear write the story. It is the discipline to edit the script, to tear out the old pages, and rewrite your life in a bolder font. No, belief is not easy. But neither is regret. And only one of them builds something beautiful. Chapter 4. The Weapon of Clarity. There comes a point in every journey where belief alone is not enough. Belief is the ignition, yes. It is the fuel that moves you beyond doubt. But without clarity, belief becomes a wildfire with no direction, a force that burns energy but builds nothing. Clarity is what gives belief its shape. It is the sword that cuts through distraction, the compass that transforms raw conviction into meaningful forward motion. Without it, you are not building a life, you are reacting to one. And that's what most people are doing, whether they realize it or not. They are not designing their lives. They are waking up every day and surrendering to the path of least resistance. They let their schedule be defined by obligations instead of purpose. Their goals are vague, undefined, buried under 1,000 distractions. They confuse motion with progress. They confuse noise with momentum. And they wonder why, after all the effort, nothing truly changes. Clarity is not something you stumble into. It is something you must create. It is a discipline, not a mood. You cannot expect your mind to produce clarity in the middle of chaos. You must claim it in the silence before the world enters. Every morning, before you scroll, before you check messages, before you answer to the outside, you must go inward and ask yourself with ruthless specificity, what am I building? Why does it matter? What must I become in order to receive it? You see, the mind, left untrained, will chase everything that is urgent and neglect everything that is important. It will seek pleasure and avoid purpose. It will give you a long to-do list and never ask whether any of it matters. But clarity corrects that. Clarity is the filtration system for your attention. It tells you what deserves your focus, what demands your energy, what requires your best self, and it makes it painfully obvious what you must start saying no to. Because until you get clear on where you're going, everything will feel like a detour. Every new opportunity will feel tempting. Every new failure will feel fatal. Every setback will feel personal. But once you define your path, once you write it down, speak it aloud, and imprint it into the fabric of your identity, then everything you experience becomes data, not drama. Every obstacle becomes a signal, not a sentence. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. That's the difference between wandering and building. Wandering feels like movement but leads to fatigue. Building requires vision, but it leads to legacy. Think of the great builders of history. Nikola Tesla wasn't just a scientist experimenting with ideas. He had an obsession with clarity. He saw the future in his mind in vivid detail before he ever touched a circuit. He understood that the precision of thought precedes the precision of execution. The clarity he carried internally allowed him to create systems the world was not yet prepared for. Or think of someone like Steve Jobs. He was not merely a CEO, he was a guardian of clarity. He stripped away anything that did not align with the central vision. He was criticized for being intense, demanding, even difficult, but that intensity was not ego. It was clarity in action. It was the refusal to let noise dilute focus. He knew that diluted focus leads to diluted results. That saying yes to everything was the death of excellence. So many people today are exhausted not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing too many things that don't matter. They are buried under expectations that are not rooted in purpose. They are working jobs they never questioned, chasing goals they don't even want, keeping pace with a culture that sells urgency but has no understanding of meaning. Clarity is the antidote to that. And it starts every morning, not with a complicated ritual, but with honest reflection. Sit down. Remove the noise. Ask yourself directly, if I continue living the next year exactly like I lived yesterday, where will I end up? And is that a destination I respect? If the answer is no, then clarity demands that you stop pretending, that you stop waiting for the right time, that you stop assuming clarity will come after success, and start understanding that clarity must come before it. You don't get clear by arriving, you arrive because you got clear. Every empire began as a blueprint, not a guess, not a hope, a plan. Specific, relentless, rooted in meaning. And clarity isn't just about goals, it's about identity. Who are you becoming? What values are you refusing to compromise on? What will your name represent when you're no longer in the room? Because when your clarity is rooted in something deeper than personal ambition, when it's tied to service, to purpose, to something greater than yourself, it becomes unshakable. It survives failure. It survives rejection. It becomes the fire that keeps burning even in the coldest seasons of your life. That's why clarity must be revisited every single morning. You don't just set it once. You refine it. You deepen it. You adjust the lens so that your vision stays sharp even as the landscape changes. Clarity is alive. It evolves as you evolve. And if you don't update your clarity, you'll find yourself succeeding in things you no longer care about. Climbing mountains that lead nowhere. Achieving goals that feel hollow because they were built on an outdated version of who you were. So when the world pushes you to speed up, slow down. When life demands that you react, choose to respond. Take 10 minutes every morning to realign with your direction. Write it down. Speak it aloud. Burn it into your awareness until every part of your being remembers why you began. Because without clarity, talent is wasted. Energy is scattered. Life becomes a blur of busy days that never add up to something you're proud of. But with clarity, even one focused hour can do more than a month of scattered effort. Clarity is not a luxury. It's not something nice to have. It's a necessity for anyone who refuses to live on autopilot. So treat it that way. Reclaim it every morning. Protect it like it matters, because it does. It is the difference between noise and signal, between drifting and driving, between a life of regret and a legacy of meaning. Chapter 5. Vision is a weapon. Vision is not a fantasy. It's not wishful thinking. It's not a daydream you entertain when life gets quiet. Vision is a weapon, one that cuts through chaos, distraction, and fear with the precision of a sharpened blade. It is the force that turns belief and clarity into momentum. It's the lens through which the future begins to take shape inside the mind of the present. Without vision, even the strongest belief and the clearest goals collapse into exhaustion, because vision is the emotional engine behind long-term endurance. It is what sustains you when nothing else makes sense, when the results aren't visible, when the applause goes silent, when no one is watching but the voice inside you. You see, people talk about goals all the time, what they want, what they hope to achieve, but most of them are setting targets based on their past limitations, not their future capacity. And that's not vision. That's management. That's playing small in a world that rewards boldness. Real vision begins where logic ends. It's not built from what you think is possible based on what you've seen. It's built from what you feel is necessary based on who you were born to become. It is not a reflection of what is. It is a declaration of what must be. Think of the men and women who changed the world, not by following the obvious path, but by holding a vision so powerful, so unreasonable to the minds around them, that the world was eventually forced to catch up. Martin Luther King Jr. did not simply want social reform. He carried a vision so clear, so emotionally undeniable, that even those who opposed him couldn't erase it from the culture. He said, "I have a dream, not, I have a plan." Because vision always begins as a dream, but what makes it powerful is when it is nurtured every single day, through discipline, through clarity, through sacrifice, until the dream becomes infrastructure, until the abstract becomes tangible, until what began as invisible becomes inevitable. That's what you must do every morning. Before the noise of the world can drown it out, you must reconnect to your vision. You must feed it. Not once in a while, not when you feel like it, but daily, with the precision of a soldier and the passion of an artist. Because vision, left unattended, begins to fade. And when it fades, you start operating from memory instead of imagination. You start recycling goals instead of creating new ones. You start managing the life you've built instead of expanding the life you deserve. And that's the death of growth. Not failure, not rejection, but stagnation disguised as success. The most dangerous place you can be is comfortable in a life that's too small for your potential. You must understand, vision is not just about what you want to achieve. It's about what kind of human you want to become in the process. It's not just about the house, the business, the numbers. It's about the character, the strength, the wisdom, the courage you will be forced to build in order to hold that life without breaking under its weight. Because every vision worth chasing will require you to outgrow the man you were yesterday. It will force you to destroy every excuse, every mental shortcut, every outdated pattern that no longer belongs in the future you're building. Walt Disney didn't just dream about amusement parks. He envisioned worlds, entire realms of wonder, before even one brick was laid. And he didn't wait until the world validated his vision. He believed before there was proof. He walked through fields of nothing and saw castles. He heard laughter where others saw cost. And every morning, he got up and recommitted to that inner picture, even when money ran out, even when banks rejected him, even when people walked away. That's what vision demands. It demands loyalty. Not when it's convenient, but when it's lonely. Your vision will make people uncomfortable. It will expose their fear. It will make them question their own complacency. And when that happens, they will try to reshape your dream into something more reasonable, more practical, more like them. But you must not let them. Because the moment you dilute your vision to fit someone else's comfort, it stops being yours. That's why you protect it. That's why you speak it aloud every morning. That's why you write it, rehearse it, build it piece by piece even when no one else understands. Because your future is built in the quiet moments of unreasonable faith. Those early hours where no one is clapping, where no one is cheering, but something inside you whispers, keep going. And vision isn't static. It must evolve as you evolve. You must continually reimagine what's possible. You must stretch your thinking beyond the horizon of your current experience. Because if your vision doesn't scare you just a little, if it doesn't wake you up in the morning with both excitement and pressure, then it's not a vision. It's a memory in disguise. Vision should pull you. It should create a gravitational force so strong that giving up feels like betrayal. So tomorrow morning, don't just go through the motions. Don't wake up and react to the world. Don't drown in routine and call it discipline. Sit down and ask yourself, what am I really building? Not just what's on my schedule, not just what's due, but what is the picture I am painting with my life? What does it look like in 5 years? 10 years? Who is there? What values are present? What kind of peace surrounds me? What kind of battles have I conquered to arrive there? And then walk through that vision in your mind in high definition. Don't just think it, feel it. Step into it as if it already exists. Let your nervous system experience the future as if it were now. That emotional rehearsal is not a game. It is the foundation of identity. The brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experience and real memory. So when you rehearse your future every morning, you are literally training your body to become the person who can hold it. That is what high performers do. That is what artists do. That is what leaders do. They don't just respond to reality. They create new ones. And so must you. You don't need more time. You don't need more approval. You need vision, real vision. One that anchors your mornings and electrifies your days. One that reminds you, in every moment of doubt, that there is something greater waiting on the other side of discipline, sacrifice, and resilience. Because vision is not just what keeps you moving forward. Vision is what keeps you alive. Chapter 6: The Reason You Breathe. Purpose is not something you find on accident. It is not stumbled upon like spare change in the cracks of a life you never truly owned. Purpose is something you decide. It is something you declare. It is something you fight for when no one else understands the war. And while belief gives you the will, and clarity gives you the direction, and vision gives you the picture, purpose gives you the reason to keep going when none of those things feel like enough. Purpose is the foundation. The deeper it runs, the stronger you stand. When you're built on purpose, you don't fall apart when circumstances change. You don't collapse when things take longer than expected. You don't surrender to pressure, fatigue, or the ever-changing weather of the outside world, because something in you runs deeper than all of it. Something immovable. Something eternal. And that something is what separates those who simply exist from those who are remembered. You can build skills, stack wins, accumulate wealth, but without purpose, all of it will eventually feel hollow. Because the soul does not thrive on success alone. The soul needs meaning. It needs connection. It needs a reason that transcends numbers and applause. Without purpose, every mountain you climb feels like another meaningless summit, another view that fails to fulfill you, another victory that echoes with silence. And that's what breaks people. Not failure, but the unbearable weight of achievement that lacks soul. So ask yourself, what are you really doing all this for? Not what the world told you to chase. Not what sounds impressive. Not what looks good on a resume or makes your family proud. Strip all that away and ask yourself, what is the thing I cannot walk away from? What breaks your heart to ignore? What injustice do you feel in your bones? What vision keeps showing up in your dreams no matter how many times you try to silence it? That is where your purpose lives. And sometimes it doesn't show up in dramatic fashion. Sometimes it's not loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a quiet pull in your gut, a sense that your life was meant to contribute something deeper than your own comfort, a knowing that you're here not just to take, but to create, to serve, to leave something behind that outlives your name. Purpose is the only compass that stays true when everything else breaks. It's not affected by opinions, failures, or the changing tides of popularity. It is anchored in truth. And that truth must be revisited every single morning. Because every day, the world will try to sell you a false one. It will tell you your purpose is pleasure, that your purpose is security, that your purpose is accumulation. But purpose is not a destination. It's a way of moving through the world. It's the fuel behind the discipline. It's the emotional charge behind the vision. It's the why behind the fight. And if you forget your why, you will eventually resent the work. You will look for shortcuts. You will burn out. You will chase artificial highs instead of enduring lows that lead to real growth. Purpose must become personal. Deeply personal. You can't borrow it. You can't copy it. You must dig for it. Bleed for it. Protect it. Let it evolve. Let it mature as you do. What drove you 10 years ago may not be enough now. And that's not failure. That's growth. So revisit your purpose like a craftsman revisits his tools. Clean it, sharpen it, and upgrade it when needed. But never forget that it is yours to maintain. No one else can do that work for you. And don't confuse purpose with passion. Passion is emotional. Passion burns hot and fades fast. Passion needs everything to go right. But purpose is different. Purpose stays. Purpose burns slowly but deeply. It stays lit when nothing else does. It carries you through rejection, failure, and obscurity. Because it's not about how you feel in the moment, it's about what you've committed to for the long haul. Look at every person you admire, every leader, every innovator, every artist, every warrior who changed something. They didn't do it because it was easy. They did it because they could not do it. Their lives were tethered to a deeper mission. And that mission gave them strength beyond logic, beyond fatigue, beyond fear. That's what purpose gives you. The ability to keep moving when the world says stop. The ability to keep showing up when the results aren't visible. The ability to endure boredom, pain, repetition, and silence, because you know that your life is part of something larger than comfort. Think of Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable horrors of a concentration camp not by luck, but by clarity of purpose. He said, "Those who have to live can bear almost any how." That is not philosophy. That is survival. That is truth refined in the darkest fire. And if purpose could sustain him there, what excuse do you have for ignoring yours? You have to stop pretending that you need more motivation. You don't. You need more meaning. You don't need more time. You need more truth. And truth begins when you stop outsourcing your reason to exist. You were not born to punch a clock, collect paychecks, and die with unused potential still trapped in your chest. You were not meant to simply follow rules, meet expectations, and fit into systems that were never built for your greatness. You were built for something specific. Maybe you don't know what it is yet. That's okay. Keep searching. Maybe you've known it for years but buried it under bills and busyness. That's okay too. Dig it out. Speak to it again. Breathe life back into the mission you once abandoned because the world told you to be realistic. Being realistic has crushed more dreams than failure ever has. And it's time to stop confusing realism with resignation. Purpose is not about feeling good. It's about being real. Real with yourself. Real with your capacity. Real with your calling. It's about looking in the mirror and knowing you are doing what you were put here to do, even when it hurts, even when it's hard, even when no one understands. That's why every morning matters. Because every morning is a chance to realign with the deepest truth you carry. A chance to burn off the lies, the noise, the distractions. A chance to say with action, I remember who I am. I remember what I'm here for. Purpose makes that memory permanent. And once you live from it, there is no going back. Chapter 7. The Bridge Between Dreams and Reality. Discipline is the dividing line. It is the brutal, non-negotiable separator between those who fantasize and those who build, between those who hope and those who harvest, between the life you say you want and the life you wake up to every morning. And if purpose gives you the reason and vision gives you the map, then discipline is the step-by-step journey through every mile of discomfort required to earn it. Without discipline, all the belief, clarity, and purpose in the world collapse into theory. Beautiful ideas but no infrastructure. Potential without execution. Fireworks with no foundation. Discipline is not about motivation. It is not about being in the mood. It is not something that waits for perfect conditions. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. Discipline doesn't check the weather. It doesn't care if you're tired, distracted, misunderstood, or underestimated. Discipline shows up. Every day. Without ceremony. Without applause. And that's what makes it powerful. Because in a world addicted to dopamine and novelty and instant results, discipline is the quiet, consistent rebellion that separates the builders from the beggars. Most people live in cycles. They start strong, motivated by a flash of inspiration, an emotional high, a video, a book, a conversation. And then the high fades. The days get heavy. The results take longer than expected. The applause stops. The goal begins to feel far. And so they stop. They quit not because they couldn't do it, but because they were never trained to endure the middle. The mundane. The repetition. The parts where growth feels like boredom and progress looks like silence. But discipline thrives in that space. Discipline is what you do when the thrill is gone. When no one is watching. When the finish line is nowhere in sight and your muscles ache from carrying a vision that still feels invisible. That's when discipline speaks. That's when it reminds you, this is where the others stop, and this is where you keep going. And you don't just stumble into discipline. You build it. You train it like a muscle. You create it every morning with the choices you make when nobody else is holding you accountable. Every time you get up when you could stay down. Every time you choose to work when you could make an excuse. Every time you keep your word to yourself when it would be easier to compromise, that is discipline being wired into your identity. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. Anybody can sprint for a week. Anybody can be great when things are easy. But discipline is about being excellent when it's hard. When it's tedious. When it's unrewarded. That's the test that 99% of people fail, not because they're weak, but because they don't understand what mastery actually costs. And the cost is daily. The cost is discomfort. The cost is refusing to be seduced by your own excuses. You want a different life? You want change that lasts? Then understand this. Discipline is not just part of the process. Discipline is the process. The best version of you doesn't appear when you're inspired. It appears after 100 mornings where you got up before you felt like it. 100 sessions where you trained when your mind screamed for comfort. 100 times where you chose alignment over impulse. That's where greatness is carved. Slowly, quietly, without shortcuts. People love to talk about freedom. They chase it, celebrate it, post about it. But what they don't realize is that true freedom is not the absence of structure. It is the result of intense structure applied long enough to create a life where you no longer need to escape. Freedom is built by discipline. You earn autonomy by paying the price of control. You get to live life on your terms only after you've proven you can master the terms. Abraham Lincoln didn't become one of the most revered leaders in history because he had charisma or confidence. He became a symbol of resilience because he had discipline. He faced relentless loss, personal tragedy, political humiliation, public ridicule, but he didn't stop. He didn't collapse under the weight. He kept showing up, refining, learning, enduring. That's discipline in motion. That's what legacy requires. Or take someone like Serena Williams. Yes, talent matters. But talent without discipline is a spark with no fuel. She didn't just win because she was born gifted. She won because she trained when no one saw, repeated drills thousands of times, sacrificed comfort for years, and held herself to a standard most people can't even comprehend. That's the truth people avoid. Discipline will always feel like punishment to those who don't understand its reward. And you, what does your discipline look like? When the alarm goes off, do you rise? When the world gets chaotic, Do you revert or realign? When your mind offers the easy way out, do you question it, or do you surrender to it without resistance? These are not small questions. These are the hinges upon which your future swings. Every morning is a chance to reset your discipline. Not with punishment, but with power. You don't need to do everything. But you need to do something, with precision, with presence, with full commitment. And you need to do it especially when you don't want to. That's the rep that counts. That's the one that rewires who you are. Anyone can show up when it's easy. You build identity when you show up when it's not. Discipline doesn't make life easier. It makes you stronger. And once you become the kind of person who keeps showing up, the rest begins to shift. People treat you differently. Results start compounding. Confidence grows, not because you feel good, but because you've given yourself real evidence that you are capable of doing hard things without quitting. You don't rise because you're inspired. You rise because you've made rising your identity. And that shift, that moment where discipline becomes who you are, not just something you occasionally do, that is the beginning of everything. Chapter 8, Where Dreams Bleed into Reality. Action is the final translation. It is the point where internal truth begins its journey into external form. It is where belief leaves theory, where vision grows muscle, where purpose meets time, and where discipline proves itself under pressure. Without action, everything else is suspended in potential, beautiful, poetic, powerful in concept, but ultimately untested. Action is the only thing the world responds to. You can sit with clarity. You can meditate on purpose. You can visualize with intensity. But until you move, deliberately, repeatedly, and without apology, none of it matters. Because the world doesn't change for what you think. It changes for what you do. And yet, this is where most people stall. Not because they don't want more, but because they are waiting. Waiting for permission. Waiting for the timing to be right. Waiting to feel ready. But action doesn't wait. It doesn't ask if you're confident. It doesn't ask if the fear is gone. It demands movement through fear, despite doubt, and ahead of perfection. Action doesn't reward the most talented or the most prepared. It rewards the most committed. The ones who understand that motion beats meditation when it comes to building anything real. You don't need to know all the answers to begin. You don't need to have certainty in the outcome to start moving toward it. History proves that time and time again. When Henry Ford envisioned the Model T, he had no blueprint for what mass production would look like. He didn't wait until the system was perfect. He acted. He failed. He refined. He moved forward. That forward motion, messy and imprecise as it was, changed the way the world moved. Not because he was flawless, but because he moved with intent when others hesitated. Action is rarely clean. It almost never feels like the right time. That's what makes it so defining. It requires that you override the lower voice, the one in your mind that clings to comfort, to old patterns, to certainty. It requires that you act before you feel like acting, that you lead your emotions instead of being led by them, that you remember the goal is not to feel good while doing it, but to feel powerful after doing it. There is a mythology around action, that it should be inspired, that it should feel light and exciting. But real action, the kind that moves your life forward, is often inconvenient. It happens when you're tired, when you're distracted, when it's raining, when you don't have the answers, the energy, or the support. That's why so few people cross the threshold. Because the moment action becomes uncomfortable, they assume something is wrong. But discomfort isn't the enemy. It's the signal that you've left the comfort zone where nothing changes. You want confidence? Take action. You want clarity? Take action. You want transformation? Take consistent, intentional, focused action, even when you're unsure, especially when you're uncertain. Because movement generates feedback. Feedback shapes decisions. Decisions refine direction. And direction, over time, compounds into results. But none of it begins without motion. And stop waiting for motivation. Motivation is cheap. It's unreliable. It's built on the false idea that you need to feel something in order to do it. You don't. What you need is momentum. And momentum doesn't come from watching or consuming or fantasizing. It comes from action. Even small action. Especially small action, repeated with consistency and purpose. That's how you rewrite your identity. Not with declarations, but with repeated evidence. You want to know who you are? Look at what you do every day. Not what you intend. Not what you believe in theory. What you do. Your actions are your signature. They're the clearest expression of your values, your discipline, your ambition. And if you don't like the story your actions are telling, the only way to change the plot is to take different ones. Think of Thomas Edison, working long hours with materials that failed over and over. He didn't stop at setbacks. He used them. He studied them. He took action again and again, not because he had a guarantee it would work, but because not acting wasn't an option. That's what belief looks like in motion. That's what vision becomes when it meets the real world. It stumbles, it fails, it adjusts, and then it gets up and takes another step. That's the rhythm of greatness. One more step. One more trial. One more move forward, no matter how small. You can't think your way to a different life. You can't manifest success without labor. You can't change the direction of your life until you interrupt the momentum of your current behavior. And the only thing that interrupts behavior is behavior. Action breaks pattern. Action disrupts identity. Action builds momentum in the face of resistance. That's why the first action of your day is so critical. Because it's not about checking a box. It's about setting a tone. The first decision sets a pattern. Hit snooze and you train yourself to delay your future. Move with intention and you train yourself to rise regardless of how you feel. Every morning, you're casting a vote for the type of person you are becoming, not with words, but with motion. And those votes add up. They accumulate. They build. Slowly at first, then all at once. So stop asking for guarantees. Stop needing the entire staircase before you take the first step. Boldly. Act deliberately. Act consistently. Even when the voice of doubt is loud. Especially then. Because action is the antidote to doubt. It's the destroyer of excuses. It is the turning point where ideas become identity and dreams become structure. You're not stuck. You're just paused. You're not lost. You've just forgotten how much power lives in a single committed action. Take it. And keep taking it. Until the future that once felt distant becomes the life you wake up in. Chapter 9. The perspective that changes everything. Gratitude is often misunderstood. People mistake it for a polite emotion, a gentle smile, a fleeting acknowledgement of blessings. But real gratitude, the kind that transforms your mindset and reorients your entire life, is not soft. It is not light. It is not sentimental. It is a mental weapon. It is a conscious act of defiance against negativity, entitlement, and despair. Gratitude is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about recognizing that even in the chaos, even in the struggle, even in the delay, there is something here, right now, worth fighting for, something worth honoring. And when you train your eyes to see it, your mind becomes unbreakable. Most people think they'll feel grateful after they achieve something. After the dream is realized, after the account is full, after the respect is earned. But gratitude doesn't begin once you arrive. Gratitude is how you arrive. It's the attitude that stabilizes you through the grind. Because without gratitude, discipline becomes resentment, effort becomes bitterness, and every challenge begins to feel like an attack. But when you approach each moment with gratitude, not just for what's easy, but especially for what's difficult, you turn life into a forge instead of a prison. And no, it's not always natural. Your brain wasn't designed to default to gratitude. It was built for survival. It looks for threats, not gifts. It sees what's missing, not what's working. That's why you have to train it. Every morning. Not once a week. Not when you feel spiritual. Every single morning, you must sit with your thoughts and redirect the lens. Not to be naive. Not to deny pain. But to reclaim power. Because the ability to find value, even in suffering, is what keeps your vision alive when nothing around you looks like progress. That's the power of real gratitude. It's not about comfort. It's about perspective. It doesn't remove the mountain. It changes how you climb it. It doesn't eliminate the struggle. It reminds you why the struggle matters. When you are grateful, deeply and intentionally, you become immune to so many of the poisons that cripple people. comparison, envy, entitlement, self-pity. Those things cannot survive in a mind trained to see meaning in every mile of the journey. Take a moment and think about it. Right now, as you read this, there are people who would trade everything they have for one more hour with someone you still have. People who would give years of their life to have the health you're taking for granted. People who live in places where freedom is a fantasy, where safety is not assumed, where education is out of reach. And yet here you are, with time, with technology, with access, with options. Maybe you're not where you want to be, but you are not powerless. And if you woke up this morning, you're already wealthier than every dreamer who never got the chance to try again. That doesn't mean you settle. That doesn't mean you stop striving. But it means you stop walking through your life blind to the extraordinary opportunity you have simply by being here. And when you anchor yourself in that awareness, when you build it into your morning, into your ritual, into your identity, your entire energy shifts. You become harder to shake. You become more focused, more resilient, more dangerous to every excuse trying to pull you backward. Gratitude is what keeps you grounded when the success finally comes. It's what keeps you humble when the spotlight finds you. It's what keeps you connected to the mission when the journey gets long. Without it, you begin to believe the lie that you're doing all of this for you, and that's when it all begins to unravel. Because real transformation isn't just about achievement. It's about alignment. It's about doing the hard work with a full heart. About building a life that's not just impressive, but anchored to truth, to meaning, to the things that can't be taken from you. Look at someone like Oprah Winfrey. Her early life was marked by trauma, rejection, poverty. She had every reason to become bitter, jaded, angry at the world. But she didn't. She found purpose in her pain. She turned wounds into wisdom. And at the core of her philosophy, beneath the empire, the influence, the global reach, was a deep, daily practice of gratitude. Not as decoration, as discipline. That's the difference. Gratitude as discipline transforms everything it touches. It makes you better at everything you do, because it changes the way you experience every step of the process. You train gratitude like you train any other muscle. You practice. Not once, but constantly. Start the morning not with reaction, but with reflection. Ask yourself, not just what's going wrong, but what is still going right. Not what you're lacking, but what you're overlooking. The people who make you better. The moments you survived that once felt unbearable. The strength you've developed from pain you once thought would break you. The fact that, right now, you are still breathing, still choosing, still capable of changing everything. Because that awareness, that level of reflection, fuels more than positivity. It fuels power. And from that place, every action carries more weight. Every step means more. Every challenge becomes another layer of your evolution, not another reason to complain. So no, gratitude isn't soft. It's not passive. It's not weak. It is one of the strongest, fiercest disciplines you can build into your day. It keeps your mind clean. It keeps your soul sharp. It strips the ego. It anchors the mission. And when you start every morning with that kind of perspective, you move through the world differently. You lead differently. You love differently. You fight differently. Not because the world changed, but because your lens did. Chapter 10. The Strength to Bend Without Breaking. Adaptability is not simply a skill. It's not a soft virtue or a casual bonus trait you pick up on the way to something more important. Adaptability is survival. Adaptability is evolution. It is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength, not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it's subtle, internal, and often invisible until the storm comes. And when the storm hits, and it will hit, your ability to adapt becomes the one thing that determines whether you remain standing or become just another name in a long list of people who almost made it. The world you live in is in constant motion. Markets shift. People change. Timing betrays you. Plans fall apart. Things that made sense yesterday collapse without warning today. And if you're so rigid in your approach, so committed to your original method, your old assumptions, your precious 5-year plan, that you can't pivot when life demands it, then you will watch the dream die in your hands and call it fate when it was really just inflexibility. Because greatness doesn't come from those who control every variable. It comes from those who remain grounded in their vision, but fluid in their approach. It's the paradox you must embrace if you want to last. Your purpose must be unshakable, but your method must be adaptable. If you confuse one for the other, you'll either become aimless or unmovable, and both are lethal in a world that rewards speed, awareness, and recalibration. Every person who built something meaningful did so not by following one perfect plan, but by adjusting constantly. Look at any innovator, leader, creator. They didn't rise because they always had the right answer. They rose because they moved toward the answer. They responded to resistance not with panic, but with reinvention. Think of Thomas Edison again. He didn't just invent the light bulb, he invented the process of adapting. Thousands of failures, not because he was wrong, but because he kept evolving his understanding of what would actually work. That mindset, not just brilliance, but flexibility, is what made his genius usable in the real world. Or look at someone like Elon Musk, not because of the hype, but because of the core principle. He moves into industries that resist him, institutions that mock him, problems that are far too complex to be solved by any one approach, and then he pivots, adapts, repositions until he breaks through. That's not luck. That's controlled chaos, mastered through adaptability. You're not going to get it right the first time. You're not supposed to. That's not how this works. You're not supposed to set one goal, follow a straight line, and win. You're supposed to adjust, to test, to experience friction and recalibrate in real time. The problem is that most people internalize failure as identity. One setback and they start telling themselves stories, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be, but not the way you imagined it. And your ability to reframe and retool in that moment is the very thing that separates those who collapse from those who rise even stronger. Adaptability requires ego death. It demands that you stop being emotionally attached to how you thought it would happen, and instead fall in love with making it happen no matter how many versions it takes. That's real power. That's not being reactive, that's being dynamic. That's what keeps you in the game when everything else is screaming at you to quit. And let's be honest, the future is not going to slow down for you. The pace of change is only accelerating. Technology is rewriting industries overnight. Expectations are evolving constantly. Entire ways of life are becoming obsolete in a single decade. If you're still clinging to who you were 5 years ago, mentally, emotionally, strategically, then you're not just falling behind, you're decaying. But if you've trained yourself to evolve, to expect evolution, to love recalibration, then you are becoming anti-fragile. Not just resistant to chaos, but actually improved by it. That's the level you need to operate from. And that begins in the quiet moments, every morning before the noise of the world kicks in, when you sit with your mind and remind yourself, I am not here to be safe. I am not here to be static. I am here to adapt and overcome. And that internal code becomes your armor. Not because it removes uncertainty, but because it removes your fear of uncertainty. So how do you build adaptability? You start small. You welcome the change you used to resist. You challenge your preferences. You say yes to the uncomfortable conversation. You try the strategy you don't fully understand yet. You take the road that isn't familiar, not because it's safer, but because it sharpens you. You stop treating discomfort as a red flag and start treating it as a signal that you are expanding. The ability to evolve is not a gift. It's a discipline. And like all disciplines, it gets stronger the more you use it. The more you question your assumptions. The more you stay open without losing focus. The more you allow yourself to reframe setbacks not as defeats, but as design updates. Because that's all failure is: data. Information. Feedback about what version of you needs to be updated to match the vision you've committed to. When you become adaptive, you become dangerous. Not because you can predict the future, but because you can absorb its impact without breaking. You become the one who still stands after others give up. You become the one who adjusts the plan but never the mission. You become the one who refuses to be stopped. Not because you're lucky, not because you're perfect, but because you've trained yourself to bend, to shift, to rise through it all without letting the fire consume you. Chapter 11. the fire that doesn't burn out. Resilience is not the ability to avoid pain. It's not about dodging the punches or praying the storm passes quickly. Resilience is the decision, often quiet, often lonely, often made in the darkness when no one else is watching, that you will not let the weight of the world collapse the structure you've spent your life building. It is not dramatic. It is not glamorous. It's not what people see when they admire your life from the outside. But it's the reason that life exists at all. Because the truth is, behind every person who has created something worth remembering, worth respecting, worth carrying forward, there was a season, sometimes many, where everything seemed to be falling apart and they made the choice to keep going anyway. Resilience is forged in places that break most people. It's not built in times of celebration, but in seasons of silence. It's built after the rejection letter, after the failure, after the betrayal. It's built in the long stretch of days where nothing seems to be working, where the people you thought would support you have gone quiet, and the dream you once held with fire now flickers with doubt. That's where resilience lives, not in the glory, but in the grind. Not in the arrival, but in the moments when quitting whispers in your ear, and you walk forward anyway. Most people misunderstand resilience. They think it means always being strong, always being composed, always being in control. But that's not what it is. Real resilience isn't about never breaking. It's about refusing to stay broken. It's about crying and bleeding and hurting and still choosing to stand. It's about screaming in frustration and still getting up to work the next day. It's about being knocked to your knees by life and crawling forward until you can walk again. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That is the most raw, real, and powerful form of strength there is. You don't learn resilience from theory. You earn it through endurance. And that's why it's so rare. Because endurance doesn't feel good. Endurance tests your limits without asking if you're ready. It forces you to meet parts of yourself that you didn't know existed. The darker ones, the doubtful ones, the scared and angry and insecure ones. And you have to walk through them. You can't bypass them with positivity. You can't hack your way through them with mindset tricks. You have to sit in the fire long enough to let it strip away the parts of you that weren't built to last. Resilience doesn't mean you don't feel the weight. It means you learn how to carry it. And eventually, you learn how to grow under it. Because pain isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's the mentor. Sometimes the pressure is what turns belief into conviction. What turns skill into mastery. What turns ambition into identity. And if you're always trying to escape the pressure, you'll never become the person the pressure is trying to shape you into. That's why you must revisit this every morning, not because you're weak, but because the world is loud, and pain is convincing, and the mind is a fragile thing when left alone with too many doubts. You have to wake up and remember why you started. You have to remind yourself that the vision still matters, even if it doesn't feel close. You have to anchor yourself back into the decision to endure. Because it is a decision. It doesn't come naturally. It's not a personality trait. It's a conscious commitment, made again and again, especially on the days when you don't think you can. Look at Abraham Lincoln. His story wasn't a straight line of success. It was a mosaic of personal tragedy, political defeat, public ridicule, and loneliness. Yet he kept showing up. Not because it was easy, but because something deeper in him had already decided that the cause he was serving was bigger than his exhaustion. That's what resilience looks like. The quiet decision to keep doing the work even when the world doesn't understand why you haven't given up yet. Or think of Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison. 27 years of watching his vision remain distant while injustice reigned all around him. But he didn't collapse. He didn't harden. He didn't become what he fought against. He remained intact. He stayed rooted. He endured. And when the time came, he emerged not bitter, but built. Not shattered, but shaped. That's not just resilience. That's transcendent strength. And you don't need a world stage to develop it. You need intention. You need commitment. You need the ability to wake up and say, I will not let this break me, not now, not ever. Resilience is not about doing more. It's about standing firm when less seems like the only option. When energy is low. When clarity is gone. When your strength feels drained and the people around you don't have the words to lift you. Resilience is the voice inside that says, I don't care how I feel. I know what I'm building. And that is reason enough to keep going. You train that voice every day. You train it when you show up to the gym even when you're tired. When you sit down to work even when you don't feel productive. When you give love even after heartbreak. When you speak truth even when your voice shakes. These moments, seemingly small, compound into a form of resilience that becomes part of your character. And once it becomes part of your character, you don't have to think about whether you can handle the storm, you just do. So stop asking for an easier path. Start becoming a stronger traveler. Stop praying for fewer problems and start preparing to rise through them. You are more capable than you've been told. More resilient than you believe. And every challenge, every delay, every unseen win is preparing you to carry the next level of your life with grace, with strength, with clarity. You don't need a miracle. You need consistency. You need to wake up and remind yourself, today I persist. Today I endure. Today I sharpen myself on the stone of resistance until I become too sharp to be stopped. Chapter 12. The Hour That Changes Everything. This is where it all begins. And this is where everything you've heard, everything you've endured, everything you've fought for finally turns into something unshakable. Because the truth is, and it always has been, your life is not determined by what happens to you. It's not determined by what you have, what you lack, or what the world allows. Your life is determined by who you choose to become every single morning before the world even knows you're awake. That first hour, that invisible window between silence and noise, between sleep and fire, that is where everything you've been chasing is quietly waiting for you to show up with the courage to meet it. Not by scrolling. Not by running from yourself. But by sitting in stillness and declaring, I am not who I was. I am who I decide to become today. You are not your past. You are not your delay. You are not the mistakes that still replay in the back of your mind. You are not your failures, your heartbreaks, your debts, or your doubts. You are the decision to rise anyway. To wake up again anyway. To move forward anyway. And every time you do that, every time you choose to build instead of break, to move instead of mope, to create instead of complain, you become something the world cannot control. You become responsible for your own power. And that's the moment when your life stops being a reaction and becomes a force. There are people who will spend their whole lives asleep, with their eyes open, with their calendars full, with their inboxes flooded, and they will still be asleep. Because they never decided to wake up from the story they were handed. They never questioned the life they inherited. They never paused long enough to ask, is this really me? Is this really how I want to live? Is this what I want to remember on my last day on earth? But you are different. You wouldn't be here, still listening, still reading, still burning on the inside, if there wasn't something in you that refuses to go back to sleep. Something deeper than routine. Something louder than doubt. Something that whispers when everything else is quiet, you were made for more. And you know it. That knowing, it's not just ambition. It's not arrogance. It's your soul trying to get your attention. It's the original version of you, the one that existed before fear, before shame, before compromise, knocking from the inside, asking to be remembered. And the only way to answer that call is to live with so much clarity, so much focus, so much fire, that everything in your life starts to align around the person you were born to be. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a single breakthrough. It's a process, a pattern, a rhythm. And that rhythm begins the moment you open your eyes. Not with the news, not with the noise, but with a declaration. This morning, I own my mind. I own my body. I own my time. I am not a passenger in this story. I am the author. You don't wait for confidence. You build it through repetition. You don't wait for results. You act like the person who already deserves them. You don't wait for life to hand you peace. You earn it with every decision to discipline your thoughts, to sharpen your words, to align your actions with your highest standard, even when no one else sees it. Especially when no one sees it. That is the real work. The silent work. The kind that doesn't get applause but builds everything worth applauding. And most people will never do it. They'll run from it. Distract themselves. Post about growth instead of doing the work that growth actually requires. But you will do the work. Because the alternative is intolerable. Because living a life that never touched your full potential is not something you're willing to die with. You don't need the world to understand. You don't need their validation. You don't need to be perfect. What you need is resolve. The decision to stop negotiating with your excuses. The discipline to act when you feel nothing. The courage to face yourself honestly. And the faith to keep walking even when the path disappears in front of you. Because if you do this, if you choose to rise each morning not as a servant to the day, but as the architect of it, then you will look back not with regret, but with reverence. Not because it was easy, but because you answered your life. And your life is not asking you to be ordinary. Your life is not calling you to be small. It is not waiting for you to fit in. It is demanding that you rise. It is demanding that you take everything you've been through, every scar, every failure, every delay, and use it as proof that you're still standing and that standing is no longer enough. It's time to run, to build, to speak, to lead, to become. You have the tools now. You've always had them. This is just your reminder, your call to arms, your return to the center. So tomorrow morning, before the noise, before the schedule, before the expectations, you breathe. You remember. And you decide again. Not just what kind of day you're going to have, but what kind of life you're going to build from it. And then you do the work. Single. Until one morning years from now, you open your eyes and realize you are living inside a life you once only imagined, in full. And it all began with this. This hour. The hour the world forgot. The hour you chose to remember who you really are. And never let go again.